Hello, lovelies, and welcome back. I am Cornell Kritz, your friendly devious Vtuber Incubus, who is doing a new interview series today. We are starting out with an interview for Halls of Watershot, and I have a very special guest here today, the sole developer of the game. So, Steve, why don't you take a moment, introduce yourself to the community, and let us know a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Steve Russell. So I started, I guess, Willis Studios, which developed Halls of Watershot, I think, starting, back in maybe 2022, I want to say. And yeah, I've been playing video games since I think I was about 4 years old, and my dad brought home a laptop with some pirated games on it. And yeah, I got into development, doing computer science and through that route. And yeah, it's been a blast so far. I'm very
Wow.
happy to be here and talk about the game.
And I have to say, I enjoyed the game a lot. And let me ask, what inspired you to make Halls of Watershot?
Yes, like I think I have a very, strong childhood memory of like going to a, was it PC Richard and Son, or one of those places that
Mm-hmm.
no longer exists, and playing the original Diablo on like the trackpad laptop that they have. And I was like, this is awesome. And, I love playing Diablo, Diablo 2, Path of Exile, a lot of these like big ARPG games. And the other thing, of course, other style of game I really was drawn into is, of course, card games like Magic the
Mm-hmm.
Gathering, Hearthstone, I'd say, or Marvel Snap a little bit. But, there's a lot of, and so one of the sort of, not like, I was like, oh man, I love both these genres put together, but also I feel like one of the, I don't know, criticisms or maybe sometimes downsides of a lot of like ARPGs like
Uh,
DI is that you sort of get into the state of like, my character is so powerful, I just hold down right click,
yeah.
everything dies.
Yep. And I have to
And
say,
I was
there's
just
a
like,
nice challenge to Halls of Watershot. And that's been a lot of fun. And speaking of card games, that kind of brings us into our next question. Where did the idea of having the skills revolve in a shuffle or roulette fashion come from?
yeah. So, I mean, really, the idea was to sort of, like I was saying, these ARPGs, they're very static in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you hit your ability one, right? You do the same thing over and over. And I was like, but card games, they add this very dynamic gameplay where you have to adapt to what cards you have, what the situation is. And so that was the idea, was to try and combine those. And, at some points I was like, I could just have like, right, a bar of like 12 or 24
Mm-hmm.
skills and do it that way. But I was like, one of the things I remember is like, watching streams of people playing like Hearthstone, and they get really into like, even though it's not supposed to be a like, fast high, it's supposed to be
Yeah.
like a turn-based game, you still sometimes have to like go. So I was like, that's, there's a little fun, there's a little maybe overlap of like learning the read the like alphabet or whatever you want to call it of the different skills, and
Mm-hmm.
that can be fun to sort of feel yourself like getting better and finally recognizing, oh yeah, like I know this spell now by look and by touch. And I just, to me, there's a little bit, I don't think, I mean, at the same time, like I'm not sure, I definitely felt like a lot of the criticism I gotten from the game is that it's tough to like get into all that and to have the spells and like have all those mechanics work well together. And I don't know, I think partially if I was like doing it all, I might be like, there's maybe a little bit more of a mix of like these three abilities rotate and these
Mm-hmm.
two are like, I don't know, something maybe more like that. If,
What
but
I like about it is because I've dabbled in Commander for Magic the Gathering, and so it's
mm,
very much like that too. Trying to get the exact skills you want, and then okay, this isn't working on these higher levels. Let's see, what do I have to choose from that I can cycle in and try to change up the hand to survive better. And it's tough on some of those higher levels. I found myself retreating all the way back to the entrance to
I mean, yeah,
trying
that's
to
a
stay away
very
from
classic
enemies.
Diablo tactic, just
Yeah.
retreat and retreat, which is something, yeah, I'm actually not like, I think as well, like not super up. I don't want that to be like the strategy, but also like that's always a great strategy, is right.
Mhm.
Just go back, kite, and attack from afar.
Um, Now, we've talked about the combat a little bit. What else do you feel sets Halls of Watershot apart from the rest of the ARPG genre?
Oh, that's a good. I mean, I do feel like that's maybe, I don't know. I guess you'd have to play a lot to sort of. So two things. I don't know how well they come out. One is the sort of randomization.
Mm-hmm.
Like the item drops are actually not totally random. They actually every single item has a little bit of a pity timer
Mm.
on it. So the idea was just sort of like, I think it can be very frustrating. You're playing a game and it's just, if you have like a 1 in 10 chance to get this, whatever exciting drop, most players, right, they kill the boss 10 times or whatever, they get 1 drop or 2 drops, but sometimes they don't get any. And sometimes you might even kill the boss 100 times and be really unlucky. And so I just sort of like, so that's one thing I think is adding in a little bit more of like, I don't know if you're familiar with how Dota 2 does their randomness, where they sort of like, if you miss a crit, then the sort of crit chance goes up the next time.
Okay.
And if you miss again, it goes up the next time. It's sort of this like pseudo RNG, I think they call it.
Yeah,
But that was sort of
it shrinks
yeah.
the window of it not happening.
Yeah,
That makes
so it still
sense.
feels random maybe,
Yeah,
but it's
and I kind of
not
saw that
bad.
because there for a while I was just getting two randoms, and then I got my first unique, and then like 10 minutes later I got my second unique, and I'm like, hey, now that's kind of cool.
Yeah, so I do like I hope there's something there about like I know like randomness is of course what keeps us playing these games where you're
Hmm.
like, ooh, like the item dropped or the thing, I found this thing that's really cool. I know like right Diablo, I definitely have these memories of like runes dropping and just being
Hmm.
like, ooh. And of course it's not fun if you know it's gonna happen. It's part of the fun is the chase. So hopefully that was balanced well. But I think if games take more of this sort of pseudo random approach, they can actually make like the experience much better for all players, but still have that, because people aren't great at determining how like, how random something is
Yeah.
maybe.
Let me ask, on top of that, was there a conscious choice to only have it be equipment, no weaponry or anything like that?
The conscious choice was development driven in that I was like, I would be very hard to find all the models for the different weapons that,
Hmm.
one of the, I guess the big feedbacks I got was like, oh, some people are like, oh, it'd be really nice just to have like a quick like melee attack when you're like in melee range or something. I was just like, oh, yeah, so I guess the answer is like, if I had, could hire like 3 or 4 more
Hmm.
people, I probably would have weapons and, more stuff. But that was just sort of more the reality of me wanting to like get this thing published at, some point in the
Oh,
year and a half or whatever that I was like, I want to get this done,
no,
That's
that makes a lot of sense, and I actually find that making it very unique that there is no weaponry, that you have to
yeah.
rely upon what the stats are on your gear and your trinkets to formulate how you're going to play. Um, and I guess that brings us around to the next question: are there any future plans for Halls of Watershot beyond release?
And I have to say, I mean, I think the future plans are I would like to make another version of it.
Hmm.
And just, I think, I've been, right, since it came out, I played, right, Path of Exile 2 came out, which had this sort of very cool, I thought, like movement with, like, so sort of, right, you can move wall casting, you can move.
Hmm.
And that definitely, I felt like added a lot. So I definitely want to like, I also played a lot of Hades 2, which has a lot
Yeah.
more stuff with like time stopping. So when you cast a skill, like time stops, like the game stops running basically. And so you can target it much more. So I think those are the 2 big things that I'm like, I would want to explore those a lot in the next like ARPG. And I'm not sure, like, I think to really add that into Halls of Watershot would sort of require like a complete kind of
Complete overhaul.
ripping out of
Yeah.
everything. And so at that point, I'd be like, maybe Halls of Watershot 2 or some sort of similar.
With the
Yeah.
time stopping, what you could do is make it a limited resource like a stamina bar. So it's not constantly it's abused. And if they overuse it, you can end up into a deficit or a slowed or slightly dazed state. That would be an interesting way to
Yeah,
make people
I
balance
like
it.
that. Yeah.
Um, what games inspired you to become a developer?
Let's see. So I definitely, I mean, I touched on Diablo as like a
Hmm.
game I like playing and, Magic and cards that I like playing. I think really that I would say was actually Warcraft 3 that really where I first, they had Warcraft 3, I think it was like, had like this really impressive map editor where you could
Hmm.
make all kinds of crazy stuff. And they actually had, I think, this scripting language called like JAS maybe, or I forget, but something like that. So I was actually maybe the first programming language I really word was like the Warcraft 3 scripting
Yeah.
engine. And that, when I would start, I made, mini games in that scripting engine, to be like, I mean, obviously, like, you could make lots of Warcraft 3 games. It was, I was like
Mhm.
getting a little bit more, I felt like, deep into like, oh, well, if I'm not just going to make like a tower defense or something, like, I can make something where like the camera is different. It feels like a
Yeah.
third person something. And that was really fun. And of course, completely a waste of time, or not waste of time, but it completely, no one wanted to play that on the Warcraft 3 engine. They wanted to play like tower defense or Dota, whatever, right? Yeah. So, but it was just fun for me to be like, oh, this is so cool to like use it for something it's not meant to, and I can like create it and change it. And then, yeah, so I was studying math and computer science in college. And I was teaching some math and computer science to high school students after, and I was like, oh, it's always fun to like give the kids a project. And I was like getting more interested in, it's like, let me try.
That's smart. And, speaking of camera, that's one thing that I realized when I was playing the game. You put some beautiful and really cool camera movements into the game with walking through different areas. It was really, really neat to see that on how smoothly and how dynamically the camera will pan to show an entire new direction. It reminded me of hyperscaling and Mode 7. Even though it's a 3D world, just the way that it just did that smooth transition, it took me back as a longtime player back to that
Oh,
hyperscaling
nice.
and Mode 7 transitioning you would see back in the 16-bit era.
Well, it's funny, yeah, because that actually, of course, came out from the problem I was having, like, that a lot of these sort of right isometric games have. You have to get rid of the stuff
Hmm.
that's right blocking the player from, and I think a lot of they sort of do just transparency. And I sort of already made a bunch of the models and not done it properly to have the transparency work super well. So I was like experimenting with different things. And I was like, oh, actually, yeah, the camera, like just moving the camera. And I just, I think I'm glad you said that you thought it worked well, because I was a little sometimes worried about like if your players aren't expecting the camera to move, it can be a little almost like nausea inducing or something, right? If it's
Hmm.
very different. So, but
It
I
all
think, yeah, I
depends on the
enjoyed it.
frame rate representation. Also, that would lead a lot to it on what the frame rate representation is for motion sickness, because the smoother the image is, the more likely
Mm,
it is to happen. That's why people get sick with VR, is because it's that high frame rate, but it's so close to your vision that you get the disassociation of your body sitting still, but everything that it's seeing is moving, causing you to,
mm,
your body's like, wait, something's not right here. But I had no problems with it, and I was running at 120 FPS. So,
oh, awesome.
um, and I also, what are you working on now?
So for the past, yeah, about the past year or so, I've been working on this very different game,
Hmm.
Belle Satique, which is basically you just kind of click and place little blocks and you build little cute castles and villages and canals and stuff.
I saw that on Keymailer. I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I've been working on that. It's obviously totally different genre,
Hmm.
like very, very different. I was sort of more as just like, one, I was very inspired. I don't know if you probably, maybe you've heard of Townscaper or Tiny
Hmm.
Glade, which are both. I was inspired by, especially by Townscaper, and like there's a lot of cool mathematics behind like the grid and warping these meshes to sort of fit the like kind of not perfect squares that you have, but they all have to like be. So there's a lot of cool math and stuff that I was really interested in that. And also, yeah, I just wanted to work on something that's a lot maybe simpler. A lot. I feel like, yeah, I was mentioning, I couldn't do like, it was hard to do like melee weapons. So I was like, oh, I don't have the resources. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, working on something that's just much smaller. And I'm like, oh, I can hopefully start to finish in like, which still sounds like a long time, like 2 years, but like, if you're, yeah.
For a solo
Uh,
developer who has outside things as well, that's a significant amount of time investment. And
yeah,
honestly, the work that you turned out so far is extremely impressive. And actually, I will probably go and take a look for that game next on Keymailer to add to my coverage schedule. Because I liked it. It looked interesting. Um, and I think it's one that members of my community would really, really enjoy, because I have people in my community who enjoy those kind of games.
mm.
Um,
Yeah, I sort of developed just as the idea was like it's very. I always find it very relaxing and just like calming. But of course, there's not really much to do. But sometimes I'm just like, ah, these look so nice, and I can just like look around at these nice little villages I've made, and it's very peaceful, which is something I find I need a lot. in these, current times. But
Fair enough. So we're going to wrap up here in just a few moments. One of my last questions I want to ask is, A, where can our listeners find you online? And B, are there any special causes that are near and dear to your heart that you would like to give a shout out to?
so I guess, yeah, you can, if you want, people can find me online on Blue Sky, which is the only social media I have, under, I think, Willis Studios. Yeah, I don't have any others. Yeah, I've sort of have an awkward relationship with social media where I find it,
It can be
get a
intimidating.
little too, it's a little too addictive, but also a little too, I'm like, how many likes do I get to feel my worth as a person is like meaningful, right? And I don't know.
No, I get that.
That's very, it's very tough. And then other causes that are near and dear to my heart. Well, I just moved back to New York City where I grew up. So shout out to Mom Dami, who just won the primary. So, support him if
Excellent.
you're in New York City, or
Yes.
if you're not, I guess support.
No, I've been, even if all the way out here in the Southwest, I am shouting my support for that because it's important. And so, Steve, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to sit with me and be actually be my first returning interview for this podcast series and YouTube series. So thank you very much for that. And again, folks, this is Steve from Willis Studios, and he is the sole developer for Halls of Watershot, which is an excellent ARPG game with some card game influences put in with your skill management. Make sure to go and wishlist it or pick it up over on Steam. And let's continue supporting these small and innovative creators. Take care of yourselves, my lovelies. Have a wonderful day. Remember, you are heard, you are seen, and you are always valid. Take care of yourselves.